If you know, you know.
The psychology of the oppressed. And we're going to examine, the Torah as pertains to the solutions to the systemic and or societal issues that we have in this present day. Another thing that we're going to examine is how, when you talk about the Torah teaches the power in training and why training is worlds more effective than teaching, and how teaching can make people intellectually lazy as far as indoctrination versus training that is more so focused on real discipline, practical skills, active participation, real world application, and transformative change. And why people who have only been taught in terms of indoctrination can get in the way of others being trained, to move in a more practical and tangible way as far as the teachings of the Most High are concerned. And how people, in essence, can even get in the way of themselves, overcoming some of the issues associated with just being taught or indoctrinated as a result of oppression. So, appreciate y'all being here, and we're going to get right to it. And I'm going to start with this statement. See, humanization has always been an issue amongst oppressors, as far as them kind of avoiding seeing people to be people. When you talk about counterproductive norms like the liberty and the happiness, you see that a nation would represent itself with, but violence and cruelty and greed are glorified as staples in the American diet. See, just like our people were used as entertainment on the plantation via fighting to the death, being used as objects of sexual gratification in abusive and or in a humiliating fashion. The force or coercion into alcohol, as far as slaves being in conditions where they fostered addiction, because during things like holidays that are celebrated in this country, a lot of our introduction to those holidays was on those plantations where our people were forced to get drunk to entertain slave owners or whatever the case may be. So in that, when you talk about these conditions fostering addiction to numb the minds, of the oppressed within their horrid efforts to break the spirit of the oppressed. See, it blows my mind how most can be so disconnected from history that we say things like white people can buy more rap music than anybody, right? And don't do what black people do. Did white people on the plantation have black people fighting to the death, raping, coercing to emasculate black men, or to force Israelites to get drunk and become alcoholics, and then turn around and wholesale start to do the same stuff to each other on a one-to-one basis? Absolutely not. What does this tell you? Whether modern society realizes it or not, the ruling class has always been entertained with black death, sexual objectification, and the fostering of addiction amongst the oppressed to numb the people, to draw them out of reality. The reality associated with oppressed people being used as food for the system. So we're going to start out in Revelations 12, verse 1. And if anybody would be free to read that, feel free. Shalom, shalom. Rich, shalom. Eliyahu, shalom. You, Lutza, shalom. Manataz, how y'all doing? Shalom, Mike. What's going on with you, champ? So here.
Shalom, brother. Shalom. My fault. I haven't used Clubhouse in such a long time, so shalom to you. I can read if you need me to.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Revelations 12, verse 1 through 6. It's good to hear your voice, champ.
Absolutely. I'll be reading from the King James. It says in Revelations 12:1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, in pain to be delivered. And there appeared another which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So the woman here represents the nation of Israel, and the son represents the fathers of the nation of Israel, right? The moon represents the mothers of the nation of Israel, and the child represents the defender, liberator, and government leadership of our people. For example, can you give me Genesis 37 just to substantiate those points that I just made? Genesis 37, verse 9 through 11.
It reads, and he dreamed yet another dream, and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obstinance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to you to earth? And his brethren envied him, but the father observed the same.
Yeah. So the 11 stars, represent the 12 tribes of Israel.
If you include Joseph, but without Joseph, those are the 11 tribes.
The sun, represents Jacob, and then the moon represents his mother, Rachel, right? In terms of substantiating those points I just made coming out of Revelations 12. See, this is critical, right? See, Joseph being the child that became the defender, liberator, and government leader of his people. To substantiate the government leader of his people, let's look at Genesis chapter 41, verse 37 through 44. This is when Joseph was in captivity on the front end. Right, so let's look at Genesis 41, verse 37 through 44.
And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, For as much as God hath showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Bow the knee, and made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, and Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt.
Right, appreciate that. So when you talk about Joseph becoming the defender, liberator, and government leader of his people, right? Its initial appointment, as far as Joseph being put over all Pharaoh's house, gives Joseph authority in the palace based on the recognition of the Spirit of the Most High in Joseph, right? Now, we are building on the fact that in our last class, we were bringing out how the word of the Most High is alive when we walk in it. See, the Spirit of the Most High was very much so present in Joseph because he walked, you see, according to the teachings. He walked according to the promise. He walked according to the standards of the Most High. He was a man of character. He was a man of integrity, which is the core and the focus of Israelite teachings, right? When you talk about the Torah, when you talk about justice, when you talk about equity, right? All these things Joseph modeled. So in him being put in a position of authority, right? This is a combination of the insight that was given to him and the wisdom, you see, that Joseph operated in, which is sufficient to conclude that Joseph enjoyed a divine favor, a good reason to keep him close to the throne in that sense. See, what does this principle teach? This principle teaches that our people struggle to get to prominent positions and or to be vessels of liberation for our people, right? In terms of the discipline and things of that nature that Joseph had to endure, that Joseph had to experience in order for him to become the kind of man that he became, right? When you talk about him becoming a vessel of liberation for his people. But does Greco-Roman Christianity teach that training is important to things like skills, to things like real discipline, to things like active participation, to things like real world application and or transformative
change?
Or have we only been taught within Greco-Roman Christianity from a perspective of indoctrination that has put people in position to have more abstract views and or unclear perspectives of scripture that more so is evidence of teaching and not so much training? Because when you're trained to operate according to the text, you're going to see a practical and tangible application of the teachings. See, as far as the principle that we extract from Joseph was trained in a real way, and he was prepared for the position that the Most High chose him for. And that is a central concept within the Israelite paradigm, right? So in that, why do we work? Why do Israelites work, right? What's the aim, purpose, and goal of our work? Can you get Genesis 45, verse 4 through 5?
Genesis 45, verses 4 through 5.
Yes, sir.
It says, it reads thusly, and Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves that you sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life.
See, Joseph finding himself in a prominent position to where he was able to defend and liberate his people from the condition that was upon the people at that particular point in time. Joseph being able to be in a position where his people were able to survive some of the situations and circumstances that they ran into, right? Speaks to the fact that when we understand why Israelites work as far as the teachings are concerned, the Israelites work to preserve life. We work to be able to set our people apart from things like what? Oppression. From things like what? Not having what we need. From things like what? Situations and circumstances that are inevitable, when you talk about life, which is very important to understand, because when we apply these teachings, we're applying concepts that put us in position to be able to deal with whatever we got to deal with, no matter what's going on at any given point in time, in a very practical and tangible way, right? Can you get me Genesis 46, verse 28 and 34? Genesis 46, verse 28 through 34.
Genesis 46, starting at verse 28, it says, and he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him, and he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, my brethren in my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me. And the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds, and all that they have. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That you shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle and our youth, even unto now, both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians.
This is a very critical statement when he says every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. See, the Egyptians were a people who partook in a lot of conveniences and things of that nature associated with them being able to prop themselves up, you see, as an imperial oppressor in their particular day, to the extent to where a lot of the menial work that was necessary to provide subsistence for their people was something that they saw as an abomination. See, we live in a society, interestingly enough, where people aren't necessarily acquainted with a lot of the menial work associated with producing fruits and vegetables, rearing and or shepherding animals and things of that nature, to be in a viable position to take care of whatever it is that we got to take care of at any given point in time, as pertains to real circumstances that we can run into. And you can see that the oppressive structure kind of veers people away from more realistic and meaningful things, as far as being able to, produce foods, as far as being able to shepherd animals, because they were so, I would say, insulated by their wealth. They thought that, doing those things wasn't necessarily something that was all too important. As far as every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. By identifying themselves as shepherds, Israelites would offer assurance that they would not be coming to try to take over the Egyptian social structure and or participate in Egyptian politics. This is critical. See, when you talk about why we work, Israelites work to be set apart, to preserve the lives of their people. We are not working to infiltrate and or unnecessarily participate in a system where people don't believe in tending to more practical things that are necessary to be able to take care of your people. We're not trying to participate in a system that basically cripples people in the name of comforts and conveniences as far as efficiency is concerned. See, this is critical. See, flocks and herds were kept by Egyptians during all periods. They were used as milk, meat, wool, or hides, or as some form of sacrifice. And they are depicted in relics and models in tombs and paintings and reliefs found in excavation. Deities were even associated with the ram and the cow. All demonstration of the pervasive penetration of these concepts in Egyptian culture. Most of these things were handled by slaves. See, in contrast, the sheep and the goats do not figure prominently in the fables, metaphors, or personal names, which indicates they were considered rather common. See, Egyptians considered these animals, right, that was very much so staples in their diet, to be animals that were insignificant and or abominable, to the extent to where, like, dealing with these animals is just something that really wasn't of any real importance to them. And that's because this imperial oppressor was able to insulate themselves and enrich themselves with resources and things of that nature, and or with a slave market, to the extent to where they didn't have to deal with certain things. But you see, a circumstance came upon that nation. And if that nation did not have wise Israelites in place to help that nation weather that storm, that nation would have ceased to exist. When you talk about dealing with a lot of the more practical things that are necessary to preserve life, when you talk about a work associated with setting Israelites apart. See, Israel, while living in Egypt, they lived amongst each other in a city called Goshen, which is why it says in verse 28 in this chapter, and then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. And they came to the land of Goshen, right? So even in exile, we're seeing a formula as pertains to how Israelites live if in the event they are not in their land. They live set apart amongst each other, you see, in a city that, will provide a space for them to do a lot of the things that they need to do tangibly and practically, you see, to preserve life and keep their people set apart from anything that will be antithetical to them. Yo, can you get me Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 through 7? Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 through 7.
Exodus chapter 1. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, and Naphtali. All of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them.
All praise to the Most High. All praises. So we see with the aim, purpose, and goal of why Israelites work. Israelites work to preserve life and to set their people apart from anything antithetical to the work we're supposed to be doing, as far as putting our people in a position to be productive and efficient, right? So our people living in Goshen, you see, we see what the result of that was. The children of Israel were fruitful, and they increased abundantly, and they multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty, and the land was filled with them. See, this is critical. The reason why this is important is because, like, when you look at texts like Proverbs 22, you'll see some things as central with respect to the community of faith as it relates to what the text teaches. From verse 1 to 6, as pertains to why it's important for us to work to preserve life, to set our people apart so we can deal with any practical or tangible things that we need to deal with at any given point in time, in the sense of putting our people in a position to be able to be productive and efficient. Yo, can you read Proverbs 22, verse 1 through 6?
Proverbs 22, verses 1 through 6. A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man foreseeth the evil, and hideth himself. The simple pass on and are punished. By humility and the fear of Yahweh are riches and honor and life. Thorns and snares are in the way of the froward. He that doth keep his soul shall be far from them. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is a servant to the lender.
All right, stop right there. See, this is critical, family. It's a critical text as pertains to why Israel, or why the community of faith, according to what the text reads, is one that's more so going to focus on training versus just teaching. Why Israel works to be set apart, to put their people in a position to be able to be fruitful and productive, to put our people in a position to be efficient with respect to the standards of the Creator. That's because a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, loving favor rather than silver and gold. See, you see the contrast in Egypt. Egypt loved silver and gold to the extent to where they distanced themselves from dealing with a lot of the practical things, as far as even herding animals and things of that nature that would have been necessary for them to be able to survive, some of the situations and circumstances that came upon Egypt. They had gotten so separated from doing a lot of the menial things like growing fruits and growing vegetables or whatever the case may be, that they just didn't have the wisdom or the foresight to be able to endure the circumstance that they met as far as the famine that came on Egypt. This is critical. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. See, this is going to establish the difference in the mental cast as far as the Torah is concerned, and or the mental cast produced by an oppressive society. See, in Egypt and or in a mercantile society, you're going to have people who are more so focused on producing goods and resources versus being good at life. See, as far as the more tangible things, because if you're working together in terms of producing fruits and vegetables on a more consistent basis, if you're working together as far as shepherding animals on a more so consistent basis, you're going to have to be good at life if you intend to be efficient and or effective in that role and responsibility, because you're not going to be able to put your focus on producing the things that you need to produce if your relationships are terrible. See, this is why within the Israelite paradigm, the core of what our focus is being good at life, good at how we move, good at how we think, good at how we speak. See, in a society that is more so focused on goods and services, this is a society where all you got to do is be good at an art, sport, or a career, right? But you don't much have to be good at life. You don't have to be a good man. You don't have to be a good husband. You don't have to be a good brother. You don't have to be a good son. You see, you don't have to be good at how you move, think, and speak. All you got to do is be good at an art, sport, or a career. You see? And you can be put in all kind of prominent positions. They'll put you in front of children to talk to them. You can be as crazy. You can be nuttier than a fruitcake.
Abomination.
Mercy in my heart. But they will give you a position to influence people as long as you're good at an art, sport, or career. Being good at life isn't necessarily a focus. And unfortunately, when you talk about Greco-Roman Christianity being subverted by narratives that are foreign to the teachings of the people who wrote this book, right? You have a people who, in a lot of ways, operate in the same fashion. All you got to do is be good at an art, sport, or a career. And or all the pastor got to do is be good at entertaining people. All the pastor got to do is be good at talking, because that's his career. He don't got to be good at life. He don't got to be good at how he moves, how he thinks, how he speaks in terms of how he treats people and communicates with others. All he got to do is be good at talking within the circumstance of a pulpit. See, this is how we're examining some of the ramifications of oppression in terms of the oppressors superimposing their narratives on the Israelite paradigm that will put people in position to be a whole lot more practical and a whole lot more efficient with respect to our roles and responsibilities to one another unto the Most High. See, to love favor rather than silver and gold. The rich and the poor have this in common. Yahuwah is the maker of them all. See, within the Israelite paradigm, we don't have a program where anybody's bigger than it. We don't have a program where the rich are unassailable. We don't have a program where the poor are unassailable. See, some of the ramifications of an oppressive imperial entity is you will have a structure where as long as you have money, you can get away with doing things that are horrid and or that are destructive, you see, toward yourself or other people. And see, that's why the text teaches things like, what sense does it make for a man to gain the world but lose his soul? See, these statements are putting perspective on the fact that Israelite culture is anti-oppression. See, because of the fact that being sound-minded is more important than being irresponsible when it comes to your pursuit of wealth or resources, to the extent to where just because you have wealth or resources, you can just move any kind of way you want to. You can talk however you want to. You can treat people however you want to, and there's no recourse. Nah, that's not the Israelite paradigm. See, the Most High being the maker of them all denotes the fact that we operate within a capacity where everybody's to work together at a high level. Everybody is to look to create things that are good for us and others at a high level. Everybody's to communicate with each other on a high level. And everybody is to do these things in ways that are clear to see. Like, you're supposed to see us working together tangibly. You're supposed to see us working together and creating things that are good for us and our people tangibly. You're supposed to see us communicating with each other on a high level tangibly. But you don't see this in Greco-Roman Christianity. That's because when you talk about the oppressor's paradigm, which is more so focused on teaching, which is indoctrination, versus training in order for people to have real discipline, practical skills, active participation in work that benefits everybody around said person, and real world application and transformative change, you see, that is to be propagated by people who are doing what the Most High commands his people to do. When you talk about Torah, see, this is why, to understand, the rich and the poor have this in common, that the Most High is the maker of them all. We don't have a class-based society where people feel that they can do whatever they want, however they want, with no regard for how their decisions impact other people. See, a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. See, wise men are able to recognize different situations and circumstances and know what to do in response to that situation and circumstance. But the simple don't have that discernment, don't have that discipline to be able to recognize whatever the case may be and then make the necessary adjustments. For example, in this day and time, if there's ever a point where a lot of the things that we depend on are not necessarily going to be readily available to us, right? A lot of us, if we're simple, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, and then we're going to pass on and we're going to find ourselves being punished. Versus operating according to the wisdom of the Most High and putting ourselves in positions to learn how to do things that we need to know how to do as far as fruits and vegetables is concerned, and or knowing how to deal with animals and things of that nature, so we can be able, to be productive, whether a situation is going on or whether it's not. Whether we run into, difficult times or not. We need to be able, to tend to these things in a tangible and practical way. See, these things are important. Very, very much so important, right? See, Egypt is more so going to reflect the simple passing on and are punished without Israelites who had the wisdom of the Most High, that pretty much saved everybody involved with these people, having that direction and understanding from the Creator. Egypt, without that wisdom, would have basically starved due to the situation and the circumstance that came upon Egypt. But because Israel, when you talk about the wise man foresees evil and hides himself, see, Joseph being that individual who was a defender and a liberator of his people, to the extent to where he was able to recognize what was coming, right? And he was able to put him and his people in a position to be protected from what came. See, why am I examining this? Why am I highlighting this? Because tangible and practical application of the word of the Most High is very necessary and essential to understand the book that we say we ascribe to. Let's look at Acts chapter 2.
Acts chapter 2, verses 40 through 45. And with many other words did he, which is Peter, testify and exhort, saying, Save yourselves from this untoward generation. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized, and the same day there were added unto them about 3,000 souls. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread, and in prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men as every man had need. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, and did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart, praising Elohim and having favor with all people. And Yahweh added to the ecclesia daily such as should be saved.
Kahalayah. I appreciate that. Let me ask y'all this. Is Greco-Roman Christianity teaching Acts chapter 2, verse 40 through 45 in a practical and tangible way?
No, I was just going to say, without a doubt, it does not teach any of this.
But this is, New Testament, correct? And it's interesting that, we see a consistent theme throughout the text, even in terms of how we went back to Goshen, how the community of faith was living amongst each other in order for them to be efficient and productive. And now we read in Acts chapter 2, verse 40 through 45, it's about the community of faith living amongst each other to be efficient and productive. You tell me if I'm tripping, or am I seeing a consistent manner and or mode of operation within the community of faith throughout the book?
When you read it without the oppressor influencing our thinking, then you're absolutely right.
Help, Papa. All praise to the Most High. And may the Most High, wake his people up in real life. See, it says, with many words, he testified and exhorted them in saying, be saved from this perverse generation. See, the community of faith is not supposed to be relegated to environments where surrounded by things and or people that's hostile towards the Most High and his program. Because you would have people subjected to oppression at every turn. See, you would have people subjected to all kind of conditions and things of that nature that would be antithetical to us living the kind of lives that the Creator intends for us to live as far as justice and equity is concerned. See, we operate as if bad company corrupts good morals isn't a reality. Like that isn't a thing. Like that's not true. We live as if that's not a standard. Bad company corrupts good morals. And that's a lot of the reason why you can have so many people say that they subscribe to this text. But our views of this text are abstract, unclear, vague, and in no way, shape, or form contextual, and or in no way, shape, or form consistent with what's written in a practical and tangible way.
That part.
That's why we may not connect with the fact that the core of this teaching is about justice and equity. And an aspect of justice is to be moral in how we govern ourselves and our people. Surrounded by things and or people that don't operate according to our standards is not us being moral in how we govern ourselves and our people, if bad company corrupts good morals. Save yourself from this perverse generation. Save yourself from a people that is just hostile towards each other and against each other. You see, now these people ain't hostile towards each other or against each other for no reason. The imperial oppressor, that is the Roman Empire, is present at this particular point in time. And we do need to understand the reality of the oppressor's methodology is to come in and use lies to create hostility and or distrust amongst the oppressed. Then the oppressor can use things like sexual abuse or sexual irresponsibility to create chaos in our communities. Because when you have young people born to relationships that are not stable, born to relationships where the people didn't come into that relationship with the intent of producing a strong, faithful, consistent, and solid person, a strong, justice-oriented, equity-motivated person. See, when you have people who did not come together for those reasons, as pertains to a people who have been lied to, a people who have been manipulated, a people who have been, to a degree, cultivated to be against one another to a certain extent. When you talk about lies used to create distrust and hostility, and then the sexual irresponsibility that has been used to create more chaos amongst the oppressed, to produce people who are going to more so compound that chaos and or substantiate that chaos amongst the oppressed. Peter says, save yourself from this perverse generation. Or Kepha. Save yourself from a people that are dealing with the very real and tangible ramifications of oppression. Save yourself from an environment, in essence, where the oppressor has been able to make themselves necessary, you see, through strategic interference. They create chaos and then they make themselves the answer to that chaos or the solution to the chaos. They tell our people are criminals. They invest in that narrative being impressed upon our minds before we were ever in real life, in a tangible way, as far as what we became in this country, as far as the identity that has been forged upon our people in this country. They told us we were criminals before we ever adopted that identity. See, they create chaos and they make themselves necessary on the back end. So now, to police our communities, it seems as if we need them. To deal with issues in our communities, now it seems that we need to reach out to them. To get an education, to get an understanding of whatever it is that we need to be in life, it seems that we need to reach out to them. That's interesting. Because the text teaches us to save ourselves from perversity, to liberate ourselves and or others from environments where lies have been used to create hostility, sexual irresponsibility, glamorized, creates more chaos amongst a people who have been oppressed. And strategic interference then is used for them to be able to enrich themselves with the conditions that they contributed to. I say contributed to because the reality of it is no matter what they've done, we didn't have to yield to it. And that's where we got to take responsibility for what's going on with us.
It's us for us.
That's where we got to be a people that say what we didn't have stops with us.
Off the dribble.
That's when we got to be a people that say the ceiling of everything that I need to gain and become a man, the ceiling of everything that I need to gain, you see, to become an effective individual, the ceiling of everything that a sister would need to gain and become a woman and an effective individual, that ceiling is going to be their child's floor. See, but that's only going to take place when we come to understand how much training is more effective than teaching, in terms of how teaching can lead to an intellectual laziness, because that's the aim, purpose, and goal of indoctrination, versus a training that produces real discipline, practical skills, active participation, real world application, and a transformative change. Save yourself from this perverse generation. Then those who received this word were baptized. See, that's a whole nother teaching, just to highlight what baptism is within the context of the culture. But we're going to stay the course. And it says, and at that day, there were 3,000 souls added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine, and in fellowship, and in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. Then fear came on every soul, and wonders and signs were done through the apostles. See, the reality of it is, the Ruach of the Most High, the Spirit of the Most High, dwells in communities that are set apart unto him in a very tangible and practical way. To the extent to where the people are beholding the manifestation of that Spirit, of the Ruach of the Most High, as far as the actual liberation, the actual change, the actual skills and things of that nature that were given to them by the Spirit and power of the Creator to tend to their needs in a very tangible and practical way. It says, and now all who believed were together and had all things in common. See, this is critical when you talk about all who believe were together. Now we're seeing a consistent theme throughout the text. Now you can have people with mercy in my heart that can even call themselves pastors, right? And they'll say things like, we don't necessarily need to, follow orders or keep commands and things of this nature. The reason why fear come on every soul is important as pertains to what that means in the culture as far as respect. So we're going to show why fear coming on every soul is important. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21. Ephesians chapter 5.
Ephesians chapter 5, starting at verse 21. Submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of Allah.
Y'all see why fear coming upon every soul when the community of faith is together is important? Y'all see that? It's because it... All praise to the Most High. Go ahead, Doc. What's your thoughts on that?
No. I was just agreeing with you that fear is important to the Most High because, again, we're made in His image, at least those who are professing to be of His name, and thusly we are to submit to one another. Paul says, what does Paul say or Shaul say in Romans? We should do these things not to please ourselves. What is that? Romans 15, I think it is. He says, let me go real quick. My fault.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
Strong to bear with the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbor for his good to his edification. Romans 15, 1 and 2. So that's what I was thinking of while you were saying that.
Yeah, all praises. All praises. See, this is critical, family, because the exhortation and the charge to submit to one another in the fear of the Most High. This fear is respect. Now, we want to make that very plain. This is not a scared fear. This is not a timid fear. This is a respect. It says, submit yourselves to one another in the fear of the Most High. The community of faith being intact puts everybody in a position to operate in order. Why? Because this is a culture that is very tangible and practical as far as the importance of people being able to work together at a high level. Order is necessary when you talk about the militant structure of the nation of Israel. You'll have pastors that tell you things like you don't have to keep commands. You don't have to keep orders. A pastor can tell you he don't have to keep commands. He don't have to keep orders. I argue that's because of the fact that he doesn't know what he calls himself teaching. He doesn't live by what it is he says he ascribes to. Anybody coming to me within Israel and or within the community of faith, and I have a viable charge for me to carry out, when it comes to the standards of the Most High, it's incumbent upon me to acknowledge that and carry out that order and or instruction. Anybody within the nation of Israel, if there's ever any charge or a command given to them according to the standards of the Most High, it's incumbent upon that individual to carry that out. Why? Because we operate within a nation and or we operate within a community of faith that more so is founded upon order, founded upon harmony. Now, we ain't talking about people being controlling in ways that's unnecessary, because can't nobody charge you or command you to do anything that would be demeaning or that would be dehumanizing or that would be unjust. Can't nobody charge you or command you to do anything you see that would be inequitable. See, but we do. Yeah, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
No, I just want to add one more word: abusive.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
one in proper leadership would be abusive to the saints or to the sheep.
All praise to the Most High. That's a fact. Why is that? Because the core of Torah is about justice and equity. Nobody's bigger than the program. Leaders are not unassailable. Leaders are not beyond correction. Right? That's why it says submit yourselves to one another in the fear of the Most High. This ain't just everybody, in essence, submit and accept the leadership. And this ain't, you see, certain people submitting and not others. Nah, this ain't what's going on. Everybody's to submit themselves to one another in the fear of the Most High. Why? Because this is a community that is founded upon order. It's founded upon what? Real application, real discipline, practical skills, participation, actively, you see, and transformative change within the community of faith for the well-being of the community of faith unto the Most High. Right? There's a lot that I argue Greco-Roman Christianity is left on the table Because if Greco-Roman Christianity understood the text in which it reads, then you will see these things applied to the life of the believer in a very tangible and practical way. You would see that it would not be foreign for quote unquote subscribers to these teachings. It wouldn't be foreign for them to carry out orders and or commands. It wouldn't be offensive for them to carry out orders or commands. You wouldn't see pride well up in quote unquote Christians who are given orders or commands if they understood the text in which they read. See, but that's the difference between training and teaching. Teaching is more so leading to indoctrination, and that produces an intellectual laziness. Training produces real discipline, practical skills, active participation in real-world application, and transformative change. That's a completely different concept, you see, than what it is that we're getting from Greco-Roman Christianity. See, he says, coming back to Acts chapter 2, it says, now all who believed were together and had all things in common. They sold their possessions and their goods, and they divided them among all as anyone had need. See, this is a very tangible and practical application that the Spirit of the Most High brought these people to be able to meet the needs of their people when and as necessary, to provide resources and things of that nature for their community when and as necessary, right? And this is the first thing that the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit, being poured out upon the people. This is the first thing that they carried out. Imagine that. So imagine people talking about they got the Holy Spirit today and don't fear the Most High, and don't have no real regard for practical or tangible application of the Scripture. Don't have any real regard for training people to operate according to the standards of the Creator. Imagine that. And it says, so continuing daily with one accord in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, and they ate their food with gladness and a simplicity of heart. Why is the simplicity of heart critical? Because the simplicity of heart, in essence, isn't limited to being simple-minded. It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are living amongst one another to preserve a particular mindset, a particular perspective. And that is what? Sincere people, single-minded people. See, living amongst one another as a community of faith is concerned is putting people in a position to be focused on the single-mindedness that we are supposed to have according to the teachings of the Most High, in terms of being the people who are able to respond to truth and facts, versus living in a world subverted by lies to the extent to where you can't hold nobody accountable because everybody mentally is like fat grease. Right? So when you talk about people mentally, you see what I'm saying? Being like fat grease, they slippery, right? Anytime any truths are presented, the mind can go here, there, and everywhere. See, this is critical. When you talk about understanding that the community of faith is something that is established to put people in a position to have a simplicity at heart, to be single-minded in their focus. The community of faith is protecting the minds of the people from anything that would be antithetical to them being sound-minded, being able to respond to truth and facts. See, this simplicity of heart, we're talking about a people who have the ability to be mentally honest. See, why is that important? Because we're talking about a teaching that's anti-oppression. People who have grown up in an oppressive society are the exact opposite of that, as far as mentally honest. You can't be immersed in a world that's antithetical to the teachings of the Creator. You say you can't be immersed in oppression and be moral, integral, and or focused on truth and facts, because that environment is cultivating a mentality to do the exact opposite. That environment doesn't require people to be moral. It doesn't require people to be disciplined. It doesn't require people to care about themselves and or their people. It doesn't require them to be honorable or respectful people. And see, the reality of that matter is so important. You see, because that's the difference in understanding this text versus continuing in a Greco-Roman narrative that has put people in the position to be taught and indoctrinated versus being trained to have practical skills and real discipline. Then it goes on to say, praising the Most High, having favor with all people, and Yahuwah added to the assembly daily as those who were being saved. See, a community of faith being established is an aspect of salvation because you're able to be liberated from things and or people that are hostile towards our liberation and or our progress. This is critical. An aspect of salvation is being able to come out from amongst perversity and environments that are overran with the manacles and the shackles of oppression. But we go to buildings called churches that are surrounded by environments that are antithetical to the teachings, so-called, that are coming from these buildings. When the book we read is the exact opposite. These people are coming out of perverse environments to live in communities that would more so fit this analogy. For example, if you got fish living in an aquarium and the water is toxic, what do? Do you try to treat the fish in that toxic water? Or do you take the fish out of that toxic water and put them in a clean environment and then treat them in that environment? See, what we don't realize is some of the residue associated with Greco-Roman Christianity has taught us to ignore the fact that bad company corrupts good morals. To ignore the fact that these toxic environments have been created by the oppressor through things like redlining, where our communities with things like cut off from resources and or from having a collective functionality amongst one another. And in these environments being created by redlining, where within capitalism, apart from real efforts of capitalists to create an equitable world, capitalism, you're always going to have people at the bottom and then the people on the top, because that becomes a necessary predatory situation where the people on the top of society have to keep the people on bottom in order for them to stay on top, because a lot of their wealth and their resources and things of that nature are incumbent upon the people at the bottom of society being at the bottom of society, i.e. the industrial prison complex is the largest entrepreneurial endeavor in this country. So there is incentive in us coming from environments that were cut off from resources or cut off from a collective functionality and a consciousness amongst one another as far as the community of faith is concerned. There's incentive behind that, because the largest entrepreneur endeavor in this country depends on us populating that system at a massive rate. Mass incarceration has been used against us in this country before we ever became a people who embraced a lot of these criminal narratives that were superimposed upon us, that began to characterize a lot of the behavior of the people in our communities and or our family. Before these things were ever a reality, these things were put out there. See? And when you talk about a people experiencing redlining, as far as mortgage inequities, as far as insurance inequities, as far as not having access to funding in an equitable manner, you see, to propagate and hold up businesses and things of that nature that would be necessary toward us being able to supply our communities with the things that our people need in a more equitable fashion, in terms of how you see in this text, they use their goods to take care of everyone in the community. We got to understand that we've been taught, which has led to our indoctrination, which has made us intellectually lazy, versus trained to live according to the text, the way the text teaches us to be trained, you see, in order for us to have real discipline, practical skills, active participation, real world application, and be able to create an environment that's going to assist in transformative change in our communities. See, when you talk about a toxic environment, Like that aquarium, those fish, you see, are malfunctioning because of the environment that they're in. There's nothing wrong with the fish. It's something wrong with the environment that our people have been in. See? So how do you help those fish? You take them out of that toxic and or that perverse environment and you put them in a clean one. And then you begin to help them overcome some of the ramifications of oppression in a clean environment where morals is a standard, where character is required, where efficiency is our aim and our focus. Why? Because we work to preserve life. We work to set our people apart in order for our people to be productive and efficient. This is critical, family. Why is that with regard to the psychology of the oppressed? Has anybody ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Has anybody ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Yeah, what's your familiarity with Stockholm Syndrome, huh?
Basically, the oppressed attach themselves to the oppressor in a survival way in order to thinking that the oppressor actually cares about them, even though in reality it's committing more and more harm to the one who's been oppressed or the one who's under captivity, whatever the case may be. You begin to take on their mindset and you begin to feel an empathy even for that captor, though they live wickedly and though they treat you wickedly.
That's a fact, you right on the money. Stockholm Syndrome is feelings of trust or an affection felt in many cases of kidnapping, oppressive relationships, religious manipulation, and or a hostage, you see, being taken by a captor or an abuser or an oppressor after extensive abuse. See, this speaks to a people in abusive, oppressive, and or kidnapping conditions due to things like manipulation, you see, coming from the relationship that they may have with a person that's inflicting this injustice upon them. The person being abused, right, held hostage or manipulated, they experience their mind breaking in order to cope with circumstances, to develop an affection for the offender. This is how children grow to have affection for narcissistic parents. This is how people grow to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to counterproductive school systems. This is how people become disconnected from reality as pertains to moral corruption in the workplace. See, in this psychological response, the mind breaks to try to compartmentalize the abuse or manipulation as if it's normal. To the extent to where that person whose mind has broken will start to internalize some of the views that the oppressor has forced upon him. He will even see himself and other people through the lenses of how the oppressor taught them to process their reality.
If you know, you know.
This is critical, family. See, this psychological response can bring a person to perceive that their conditions are normal.
Historical facts hit different.
This produces a form of functional insanity. The American subculture among so-called black people is impacted by the fact there has never been a point where our people had any resources developed or devoted toward our repair for things that we've gone through while experiencing the brokenness associated with what it is that has been wagered against us in this country on purpose. There's been nothing done to fix our condition. So let's look at Ecclesiastes 7 verse 7. When you talk about if and when there's been nothing done to fix some of the results of oppression.
Reading from Ecclesiastes 7:7. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart.
You see that? Oppression makes a wise man mad, and a bribe destroys the heart. That word mad there means crazy, literally. See, this word wise means to make a fool of, to make into a fool, causing him to act madly, or to act like a madman, or to say it simply, as I did to begin with, crazy. Oppression makes people crazy. This is why I say Stockholm Syndrome is something that our people is dealing with in a real way. When you talk about a people who behave as if this condition, this experience, this reality that our people are dealing with today is normal. When you talk about a functional insanity, right? Where people can be functional enough to work in art, sports, or careers, but a lot of things that we do is crazy. Glorifying music, right, that establishes a death culture is crazy. Glorifying media, you see, that glamorizes the same, is crazy. Glorifying music and or media that fosters sexual irresponsibility and or abuse is crazy. Glorifying music that is being used to subjugate our communities through addiction is crazy. But oppression makes a wise man mad, and a bribe destroys the heart. The idea of being able to have access to resources, you see, in the name of oppression destroys the heart. See, our people have literally been taught to destroy our world to try to save ourselves. You see why Greco-Roman Christianity not having a tangible or a practical understanding of this text has put people in the crosshairs of such plots, plans, and or results of exploitation and injustice. That's because Greco-Roman Christianity has been subverted by the oppressor and has been used by the oppressor to give people a pseudo religion and a false sense of hope, in lies that do not have anything to do with practical skills, real discipline, active participation, world application, you see, in real life, in transformative change in communities that are built upon a law, statute, and commandment that at its core is about justice and equity, that features what? Training, family, where people are trained in the way that we are supposed to go in order for us to accomplish what has been set out before us. See, this is critical, family. Now, if oppression can make wise men mad, like the brightest of us mad, the smartest of us mad, imagine what it can do to a fool with mercy in my heart. Imagine what it can do to those of us who may not be the wisest or the sharpest amongst our people. See, now, this is not a woe is me. This is a repent. This is we are nobody's responsibility but ours. This is a start making strides towards strategic positions to preserve our integrity, to protect our minds, to protect our people from things that are antithetical towards us being preserved, towards us being set apart, towards us being productive and efficient. This is a drill. When you talk about training to produce excellence in everything we do, beginning with men who don't live for what we want, but what our people need. This is a sister pressing for excellence, beginning with being a woman that does not exist for what she wants, but more so for what her people need. See, can you get me 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 9? Because we about to come to a close. I got one more scripture after this, and we're going to come to a close.
1 Corinthians chapter 8, starting at verse 9.
Yes.
All right. It says, "Take heed lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak."
See, we don't have freedom within the community of faith to be a stumbling block toward anybody else. And when you talk about being a stumbling block means that you're going to cause somebody to sin. For example, in Revelations chapter 2, verse 12, it says, "And the angel of the assembly in Pergamos write, these things says he who has the sharp two-edged sword. I know your works and where you dwell, even where Satan's seat is." That's your enemy's seat, as far as them having a position of authority. "And you hold fast my name and have not denied my faith, even in the days where Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you where Satan dwells. I have a few things against you, because you hold the doctrine of Balaam that taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols and to commit fornication." This is critical. That stumbling block there means things that cause people to err, or things that cause people to sin. And we do understand sin according to the Israelite paradigm to be the transgression of the Most High's laws, not this superficial, vague thing that we get from Greco-Roman Christianity, where they teach people that sin is wrong with mercy in my heart, but they teach that the law, statutes, and commandments is done away with, which in part, as a result, puts Christians in positions to sin against the Most High like it ain't no tomorrow on a consistent basis. Largely in what quote-unquote Christians are not doing for the well-being of their people. When you talk about establishing communities founded upon justice and equity, so you can train people to have real discipline, practical skills, active participation in real-world application, and to bring about transformative change. See, this vague concept of sin from a Christian paradigm is a bunch of telling people what not to do in environments that cultivate them to do the exact thing that you call yourself telling them not to do. This is teaching people not to do something while they're immersed in a world that cultivates them to do the exact opposite of what you say that they're not supposed to be doing, versus an environment founded upon the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High that put these things in a proper perspective as far as anti-oppression is concerned, as far as the establishment of justice and equity is concerned, producing soldiers and nurturers of our people in real life, in tangible and practical ways. See, Greco-Roman Christianity has put people in a position to sin. See, Balak taught Balaam in that context to send people amongst the community of faith whose culture was contrary to the community of faith. Greco-Roman Christianity has not gave any credence to the fact that there is supposed to be a set apartness within the community of faith from anything or anybody that don't operate according to a program that's focused on justice and equity, that's focused on brothers being soldiers and sisters being nurturers of their people, that's focusing on us guarding and protecting our people, that's focused on us and why we work, that's teaching us, in essence, to look to set our people apart from anything that would be antithetical to the Most High and His standard, that will be putting us in position to be focused on standards that require us to be productive and efficient. in how we move, how we think, and how we speak, because being good at life is the baseline. And we actually putting people in the position to be able to accomplish that versus teaching them things, one, that ain't true, and two, teaching them to not do things that the world that they're immersed in is cultivating, you see, them to do. Those are called counterproductive norms, where you put people in a position to where it would be very close to impossible for them to accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to set out for them to accomplish. Like trying to treat fish in a toxic environment, rather than taking the fish out of a toxic environment and putting them in a clean environment and then treating them there so they can begin to overcome some of the results of the environment that they came from. There's been nothing done to repair, you see, some of the results of injustice inflicted upon the oppressed people in this country, i.e. the children of Israel. Beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. See, we're not supposed to be causing other people to err, and that's just what Greco-Roman Christianity did with Mercy in My Heart. In terms of how it's normal for people to say they deal with this book, to have relationships with people who have no relationship with this book. That's exactly what we're dealing with here as far as Revelations 2 is concerned. Then it says, the Nicolaitan, in verse 15, it says, you also have them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitan, which things that I hate. The Nicolaitan at their core are basically people who took the quote-unquote teachings of the Messiah and tried to merge it with their pagan traditions. And that's what Christianity is. That's why you got people celebrating holidays and that have no relationship with Israelite culture. No relationship with the Israelite that was Yahushua, who the world calls Jesus. They have no relationship with the teachings you see, you find in scripture, that have very real relationships with paganism. That's what Greco-Roman Christianity is. That's why you have people who say they deal with a text, but they live in environments that are contradictory toward that text. That's why you have people who have been indoctrinated to the extent to where they've internalized some of the stereotypes that the oppressor has forged upon the minds of the people who have been in a position to be taught by them. So they see oppressed people the way that the oppressor has taught them to see oppressed people. You know how like people can be careless and heartless when it comes to the realities of what our people have gone through? How people can be ignorant to a fault as pertains to the realities of the situations and circumstances that our people are dealing with still to this day, because there's been nothing done to repair injustices inflicted upon us. You know, people who can not have any real compassion or empathy. People who can say things like, I don't care about what you went through. That's like you going to the doctor and you got a broken arm and the doctor say, I don't care that your arm is broke. Get out my face. When you talk about the ramifications of some of the mental brokenness you see that exists in our communities that are the results of oppression. I don't care that your people have been broken. Get out of my face. Now I'm going to land my plane here with this last text in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 24 through 27. And that'll be the last text we're going to read today.
1 Corinthians 9, starting in verse 24, it says, Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so I fight, not as one that beateth the air, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be
Yeah, this is critical, family, because this is an example as to how Christianity has demilitarized the text. Because when you see here in verse 24, it says, "Do you not know that those who run in a race run all, but one receives the prize? But run in such a way that you obtain it." See, those who run in a race all run. See, runners and the other athletes competing, you see in these competitions, has strict rules of training on behalf of their cities. Training, you see, in order for them to acquire the prize. The reality of it is, this athletic imagery speaks to how Paul and the students of the Messiah, these were soldiers. These men were trained in terms of the demilitarization of the scriptures. These men were men who ran, they trained, they put themselves in position to be able to grow and mature within the rules of engagement that the Most High has given his people as far as the Torah is concerned. For them to be disciplined, for them to have practical skills, for them to actively participate in the liberation and or the progress of their people, in order for them to have a sense of real world application of these teachings, in order for them to contribute to transformative change within themselves and or in the lives of the people that they serve. These were people who ran, who physically trained themselves, who exercised, who put themselves in a position through real exercise to grow in having the kind of heart and character that the Most High intended for them to have. But is Greco-Roman Christianity teaching this? Because if so, you would see a militant, disciplined people. You will see a people who are in shape. You will see a people who are fit. Because these are people who run. These are people who exercise. These are people who put themselves in a position to grow and develop character and morality through physical exercise on a consistent basis. But when you read this text from an abstract, unclear, and vague point of view, you read this man talking about you run to obtain, you see, the prize that the Most High has for our people. You read that running in a tangible and practical way in order for us to grow in the very discipline that we're reading about. Ain't nothing that come to our mind, but that's the Greco-Roman Christian paradigm. Versus communities where like you do something or say something that ain't right, champ, you got a mile to run for the next 3 or 4 days. You being disrespectful, oh yeah, you got a mile to run, you see what I'm saying, in a certain time frame. Because people are actually practically being trained to operate according to the standards of the Most High. If ain't none of this going on, that's some of the reason why you can see Christians with mercy in my heart talking about, you know, a text that they don't walk about because they've never been trained to. They've never been prepared to in a tangible and practical way, to the extent to where it's like being what you see, you read is not something that's just a far out concept, because you understand it's attainable when you train for it. Like you can exemplify, you can live by what you read when you train for it. See, anyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we are imperishable. See, these were soldiers that we reading about in terms of how they were training to be temperate in all things. He's saying if you got athletes that's training for a prize to be, and they have to be self-controlled within the context of their competition to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. He's saying nobody should be more disciplined than us. Nobody should have more temperate discipline than us. Nobody should have more self-control than us. And you're not going to have self-control like talking about it if you don't train for it. Especially if we're immersed in environments where the opposite is cultivated. See, oppressors are able to exploit people that lack discipline because the chaos that they use, in essence, to make themselves necessary as pertains to environments and conditions that they contributed to, they enrich themselves. They are able to hoard all kinds of wealth and resources as a result of the conditions that our people are in, because they have been able to put themselves in a position where they feel that they're necessary. And in them making themselves necessary, they've built systems and institutions that they've gotten rich off of as pertains to the conditions and the results of oppression. See, therefore I run this not with uncertainty, thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body that I might bring it into subjection, that when I preach to others, that I myself should not be disqualified. See, Paul is giving some perspective on the fact that these men were real life soldiers, family, as pertains to how disciplined you see a soldier to be, as far as the kind of physical training and exercise that soldiers, put in to get to that level of discipline, you see, that you would perceive a soldier would have. These are the kind of views that these Israelites had, but more so from a perspective of attaining spiritual discipline, attaining maturity, being good at life, within the context of a culture dedicated to justice and equity unto the Creator. People being moral in how we govern ourselves and our people. People being truthful. People being qualified for whatever role or responsibility that we inhabit. People who have the foresight and the wisdom to receive help and assistance whenever we need help or assistance. People who are able to work together at a high level. And people who are fair and impartial. This stuff ain't far out concepts, you see. It's not unattainable, you see, subjects if we trained for these things. Because you see soldiers to be disciplined. And what you're reading is a militarized structure within the nation of Israel where these men trained to fulfill what it meant to be men, where sisters were trained to fulfill what it meant to be women, where exercise, practice, tangible skills, and transformative change was attained through preparation in order to apply the teachings of the Most High. Lest I preach and be disqualified. See, this is not a text where we sitting up doing a bunch of talking. See, Paul describes the physical training athletes endure to seek a prize, to be the means by which he would be able to create a sufficient example as to why nobody should have more discipline or nobody should be more trained than the people of the Most High. But that's when you read the text from a tangible and practical manner. You understand that I need to apply what I'm reading in order for me to reflect what I'm reading. So to close with this statement, why is training so vital versus teaching? As our ancestors centered training more than teaching alone or just learning, is because learning centers acquiring or building non-specific knowledge and skills, which is critical. While training is focused on teaching and transferring specific skills in specific situations with respect to the application of knowledge to use life skills necessary to be an efficient people across the board. as much as humanly possible. So with that being said, we're going to close right there.